Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Verse 30, chapter 3. We have spoken of a person, a karma yogi, how he or she conducts oneself in this world. And Krishna said they have a mind that is discerning, discriminating. That means this mind is looking at what is appropriate. It has the ability to see what is appropriate in this response, in this situation, and what is the right thing to be done. It is a mind of that nature. It just kind of recognizes, it's able to look at different variables and different conditions and the context of the situation, and it says, what is the appropriate thing to do? Whereas a non-discriminating mind, one that is still developing that capacity, is, according to the verse, things in black or white ideas. In fact, this will come up further. It says either I fight and or I don't fight. So in other words, it operates through what we call a general like or dislike. This is not comfortable for me, and therefore I will not fight, or this is comfortable for me, so therefore I will stay and I will converse with you. And so a lot of our lives can be run by these two black or white binaries where someone says go and need to kind of take care of your health a little bit, but then someone says, well, I'm just not comfortable, I don't like to exercise. And so what happened there is your body on one hand is looking for some movements, some stretches, some general whatever it is, right, taking care of it, but then there's a mental condition that says I am not comfortable with exercise. And so what happens is you get a feedback system, and your body starts to kind of get more fatigued out and tired to the point where you really have no choice. You have to now go to some specialist, and they tell you anyway, hey, you got to do some movements. You got to do some, use it or lose it. So this binary system is what a non-discriminative mind thinks. It's either like this or it's like that. In other words, it defaults to what it's been doing before. And this is very easy and comfortable to do because it requires no thinking. It's just like, I always say no when it's a different opinion. And so I'm going to say no now. But if you think about it, what's your loss if you keep saying no to something that you're not comfortable with? What could be your loss if you keep on saying, no, I'm not interested in that. No, I don't like that. No, I'm just gonna, skip that. What is your loss, your potential loss?
You might miss out on a potentially beneficial course of action.
Exactly. What else?
I don't think you really know what your loss is. You may never know because
Yeah,
you didn't get
and
there.
that's a tragedy in a sense because you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know the kind of you could have maybe gotten a challenge, which is the very thing that you need to maybe kind of grow up a little bit in certain areas. Or if I just keep saying no to you because I don't like to, I mean, whatever it is, talk about a different school of philosophy, then I miss out on all of the lovely people and who are in that school of philosophy. And so this can be a very limiting way to live by succumbing to this not comfortable, therefore I will stay away. And unfortunately, as the person, see, as kids, it's very easy to sort of be very flexible and very dynamic, and you're very open to things. But as the person kind of gets in their older age, it can become very sort of a ingrained pattern. By the way, did you ever notice? I mean, I just noticed this recently and I thought about it. In my here, the soccer field where I run in the morning, there's two older ladies who are doing Tai Chi movements every morning, same time as me. And they're always doing it in one spot. So they don't move, they just do it there, which is fine. Now, there's another older lady who happened to be, I saw her for the first time, walking around the field, right? So a perfect, like circular around the field. It's fine. But then when she came to the ladies, her path was so like parallel, so set that she couldn't like move, right? She like was like 40 centimeters away from these women. It's like perfect, alignment, no flexibility at all. And I noticed this and I thought, hey, I've actually noticed this before. It's like when there is these older, I mean, with all respect to older types, they tend to not move very much. They just like go straight. And I thought, why is this? Maybe it's because this set notion of the brain, like this is my way, and I don't need to move for nobody. And I thought, no, it's not it. It's just rigidity. That's what we call rigidity in action, where even something as normal as walking becomes rigid. Tell me this, do you see this in the animal world where the two impalas, they're like perfectly parallel to each other? Like there's no deviation at all. It's like that. Do you ever see that? You never see that. They always honor each other's space, like, okay, I'm going to move a little bit around you like that. That's the natural order. So when you see this, something's going on. Anyway, it's just something that I noticed, and I wrote it in my journal because it was an aha moment. So what Krishna advises is that rather than succumbing to this black or white, I do it or I don't do it, rather ask a question such as, why am I doing it? What is the aim of what I'm about to do? What's the ultimate goal? What's the intention behind what I'm doing? What's the bigger picture? What part am I playing in this place which calls me to do something? And is it my right place to do something? So in other words, instead of this like notion where, right, binary, yes or no, well, let's get curious. What place do I have in this particular whatever domain? And then get curious and ask, what are the consequences if I say yes? What are the consequences if I say no? And am I ready to approach the consequences if they're unfavorable? Am I ready for that? If not, then could I make a slight adjustment? There's a story actually of a real life story to demonstrate how a woman who didn't succumb to this black or white, and I thought it was very relevant. So there was a brother and a sister, and the mother was dying. Now the sister was away, and the brother came to the mother. In other words, the son came to the mother and said to her, hey, why don't you write out your will and leave your things to me? Your daughter, my sister, has said that you can leave it all to me. She doesn't want any of it. So he convinced her to leave everything to him. And she died. The mother died. Then the sister found out, and she called up and said, how could you do this? How would you feel, right, if I called the mother and I persuaded her and I told her to leave everything to me and that you were okay with that? How would you feel with that? Would that be okay? And she just hung up. In other words, she had two choices. One of them was this passive aggressive, like, I'm not going to do anything. I don't want to rock the boat with my brother. Nothing's going to happen. That's one choice. The other choice is to explode and to just sort of get all rattled up, shaken up, and then go on the, on the offensive, one's defensive, one's offensive. She did neither. She said, what is the right thing to be done in this situation? And she said, all I can do is just call him up and express how I feel. Now, obviously, she wasn't happy about it. So after she said, how would you feel if I did the same to your mother and, and I lied? And then she just hung up. Think about it, she said. Think about it. Before hanging up, she said, just think about it. She didn't say return the money or split it up. She didn't say any of that. Just think about it. And after some time, the brother thought about it and he called her up and said, I'm sorry, it's not fair. And she was, pleased by that. But suppose that even if he didn't do that, the brother, at least she could take some comfort and say, I have done what needed to be done. I did not just passively accept the situation and keep quiet and not do anything, nor did I kind of explode and damage my own kind of emotional boundaries. I just did what I had to do. And he said, no, that's okay. I can still walk away and I've done my part. And I thought this is a brilliant example of how to deal with these, real life challenges where you're neither, I like to kind of just, show him who's the boss here, nor I don't like to any confrontation. I don't like this. I'm just a nice person. This is me. I'm just a spiritual person. None of this. This is all nonsense. Krishna says what needs to be done in this situation. Even if you're not successful, at least you know that you have done something, and that alone becomes your greatest or one of your biggest comforts in itself, that you did do something. And so he says further, how is it then do I participate in this world of what is to be done? How do I do what is to be done? And he says exactly, renouncing all actions to me. This is exactly what this sister did. Now, when Krishna says, renounce all actions unto me, he also says another statement sometimes, do without attachment to results. So these two, they're equal. Renouncing all actions unto me and doing things without attachment to results. But then why would he say this? Like, what do you mean by not having any kind of attachment to results when naturally this, for example, the sister, she had a certain expectation for the brother to do what is to be done. She did have that, which is healthy. We can't go without expectations, right? We always have an expectation of what needs to happen to the family, to myself, to my colleagues, to my boss. We all have expectations. Where it becomes problematic is when those expectations start to consume you. And so you're unable to think beyond just, I have to have this. This has to happen. And what happens is this takes away your very freedom to live, spontaneously, to have a kind of a good time thinking in the moment, because the mind is constantly obsessed what has to happen, because you've linked your sense of well-being so firmly to the outcome that there's no other way. But in reality, there is a way, because the truth is you will be okay without that. You will be okay if that event doesn't happen. You will be okay if something doesn't turn out as you wanted. The fact is you will be okay. That's how the system is, because you're never only limited to one situation in your life. You're much bigger than the situations in your life. Yes, Mike.
Just going to say, it reminds me of some of the more internal or reflective martial arts. They talk about the fight or flight response, and they're basically trying to dissolve that. So instead of being aggressive, pushing forward aggressively or running away, you deal with the situation, and use the energy that's coming towards you. You use that in an intelligent way, which I think is pretty interesting. And a lot of activists, we might say, get burnt out. It sounds like for the same reason, because they're doing so much and it's not working.
Yeah,
right. Because they're attached to it working, and maybe it's not going to work.
Exactly. And it's a good point. It's draining, isn't it? When you're just so invested in this outcome that it becomes stifling, it becomes contracting, and so it robs you of your right to think and to think what needs to be done next. What's the next solution? So the point is there's always a next in your life. That is always there for everyone, because you are given this brain to think beyond these binaries, and there is something in between that can be done, such as in the Ramayana, when Dasharatha was, instructed by Kaikeyi to, to hand off the kingdom to Bharat. And so what? Dasharatha came to the Bharat and said, you will be king. And what did Bharat do? He said, okay, so you're my father, therefore you have authority, and I say yes. That's how it is. So not only did the Sharat say, okay, I have to comply to Kaikeyi, but also when he came to Bharat, also Bharat did the exact same thing, binary. Okay, you're the authority, I say yes, sir. But what could have Bharat or Dasharatha done instead when Kaikeyi, said, you need to fulfill my boon? Both of them had a choice, didn't they? They both could have went to Ram and said, hey, so Dasharat wants me to be the king. Are you okay with that? First of all, he could have went to the subjects and said, hey, the subjects have a certain priority in our Ayodhya kingdom. Who do the subjects want to be the king? Okay, so the subjects want Ram to be king. They could have still negotiated. They could have thought something in between. So in other words, it shows you there's always an in-between option if you just give it some time to inquire and ask yourself, what is the larger picture? What is truly important here? And how can I preserve that harmony, not just for myself, but on the larger front, on the larger picture? Another example is when Krishna, he was in Mathura, that was his hometown, Mathura hometown, and he was, attacked by the Jarasandha constantly. So the town never got a break from Jarasandha's arrows or whatever he was firing at them. So the subjects kind of got a little bit, annoyed by this because you can't enjoy your peace. But Krishna noticed this and he said, I can either do, I have to think about how do I handle this because it's a serious situation. And he says, fighting in this particular case is not an option because all the subjects were like this. Either we fight or we all die. That was the subjects in the Mathura, right? Very binary. But Krishna said, what is an in-between option? And he says, okay, so Jarasandha's army is very powerful. We're a smaller kind of I think it was a village or a town or city. And it is also decreasing the morale of our subjects, and we're not going to last very long. And so he said, okay, we need to move to Dwaraka. Now, when he made that move, he pulled all his subjects along with him, and they called him a coward. How could you do this? You're retreating. We need to stand and hold our post. But was it Krishna really just being a coward? Or was he being strategic? He was being strategic. In other words, he said to himself, so sometimes a leader isn't just there to follow the instructions of those who he leads. That's not a leader. The leader's job is to think ahead of his subjects. The leader's job is to think on a larger scale. What is truly good for all of us? In other words, the leader is that one who's able to think in those times and places when ordinary subjects are not able to do so. And so he did. And he said, this is the wisest option there is. We will move and we will start a fresh start. We will have our forts higher and so on. And it is inconvenience, I get it, but look at the long-term benefit. It is much bigger for all of us. So sometimes we have to go through that initial inconvenience to come to the other side. And then once you settle, you find out that the effort was worth it. And that's a great feeling. That effort, that whole hard work, it was worth it. But now it's all over. Did you ever have this time where you had to make that moment of inconvenience and it was not easy, maybe changing home or whatever, relationship splitting or coming together or whatever it was. And when it all settled, you said to yourself, that was totally worth it. All that hard work, thank God. Does anything worthwhile come without hard work backing it up? anything, if you look at your life, anything that you are with a healthy pride now standing firm in, that came because of a certain amount of hard work that you put behind it. And it was not easy, but in retrospect, you say, thank God that I did put my time and energy into it. Yeah. So now, when he also says, renouncing all actions unto me, or relinquishing this need to have this outcome happen, what's the deeper philosophical meaning of this? So number one is that the outcomes are not truly in your control, right? This is the first understanding. Knowing that they're not truly in my control, then let me not be so, focused on this outcome, because it's probably going to turn out differently anyway. That's the first meaning. What's the second one? Not being attached to the outcome. In other words, do your thing without attachment to the results. Why else would Krishna say this? Like, I'll pose another question and it's going to get you thinking. Who is doing, or what is doing, the action? Lorena?
So basically he's saying your true nature isn't karma, isn't the action or the result. It's attributeless. So keep that in your mind.
Exactly.
Keep that in your mind while you're acting in the best interests of the whole.
In other words, he's preparing you for that which is already true. You are that which is much bigger than your body and mind. The body and mind is the door, is the instrument that enjoys. It's the instrument that experiences pain and pleasure after it does an action. And that instrument was never you to begin with. So Krishna, through this statement, is already preparing you, saying, hey, this body that you're carrying, it was never you to begin with. Now, every time you attach to an outcome, the question is, who is being attached to the outcome? And the answer is always going to be, I am. So in other words, you're putting your I every time in that which you are not, and it keeps you bound. It strengthens that individuality in yourself, which in other words, it keeps you a limited door, small enjoyer in this universe for maybe about 90 years. And thus, he wants to say that, you are much bigger than this door enjoyer who's constantly kind of, concerned about the outcomes. Understand your body is an instrument given to you for a short amount of time, for about 80 or 90 years, and it is endowed with certain attributes and strengths, and use those strengths and attributes to the best of your ability to be a contributor, because by nature, every living species is a contributor. Every living insect, animal, mammal, fish has some part to play on Earth. So does a human being. The only thing is, when a human being comes, we're also given an ability to say no. And this becomes a problem. This is when likes and dislikes start to override your nature as intended. That is why everyone, I think I said this in the last session, is doing everything according to your nature. That's how the system is built, because you didn't build your character that you're wearing now. You didn't build that. It is a design of Ishvara. So it's not yours. It has nothing to do with you, the awareness, the awareful being. So your character is always doing everything how is and what is supposed to be done. But the reason why we experience disharmony is because we're also given the ability to say, no, I want something that's expedient, easy, and pleasurable. And there's a tendency to say yes to that a lot more often than what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is sometimes not pleasurable, it's not easy, and requires participation, dedication, and devotion. And that's not easy. So Krishna says, relinquishing your idea of what needs to happen look around you and ask what needs to be done in this moment by me according to my unique position in the place that I'm put in. What is being called for, and then acting from that place. And then he says in the next verse, following thus this way of life, you clean up your mind and you become qualified for moksha. Verse 31, chapter 3. Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manavaha shraddhavanto nasu yantaha muchyante te pikarmabhihi.
Those people who constantly follow this teaching of mine, full of faith, without finding fault with the teaching or the teacher, Asuya, they too are freed from the hold of the karma phalas. They gain moksha.
So this verse is basically saying that to understand your nature, to understand who you are, you don't need this dramatic lifestyle shift where, you know, you renounce everything, separate, be single. This is not necessary. Just, it says, what's required is persistent alignment to the teachings of the vision of the Lord in the Gita. Persistent alignment. And along with that persistent alignment, you need Shraddha and you need Anasuya, freedom from the intolerance to find fault. These two become the two biggest qualifiers that makes up a great student. So if you ever want to ask what makes up a brilliant student in any endeavor, whether martial arts, whether the Gita, whether medicine, whether maths, whether any topic you can think, it will come down basically to these two, Shraddha and Anasuya, and we will see now why. So he says first, Shraddha. What is Shraddha? It is a provisional trust in the teaching. It's a place where you say, I don't know everything, but I am very curious and I yearn to know everything about this. I yearn to understand this deeply and to integrate it and to benefit from it in every way possible as intended. It is that ability to put aside your idea of, I know, I've done this before. It is that ability to put aside what you have heard before and to stop taking that into the present moment and trying to tie what you're hearing with what you heard before. This is a big obstruction for students where something is said. Suppose a teacher says something, a teaching, and now you say, so this teaching reminds me of what I've heard like 2 years ago by somebody else. Now they take that and they put it into the present moment, and then they ask the teacher about that instead of what the teacher has said. In other words, everything that is being said becomes a trigger to talk about something else other than what's being said. This is a common pattern that I see in those who struggle for quite a bit of years until they understand what it means to be a basic, brilliant student of studies. And it basically just means I have total trust and faith in the teaching as being given. I choose to, for a moment, put aside all these ideas how things should be, and I know it, and I'm Indian, and I'm Westerner, and I've got science education, I've got medical degree, I've got physics degree, and I'm above. So this whole nonsense has to be put aside, like a total just innocent child sitting down wanting to learn. Yes, please. This will go a long way. You know, I've never said this before, but before Advaita came into my life, I used to go to different teachers, Buddhist teachers, Qigong teachers, Tai Chi Chuan teachers, Neo-Vedanta teachers. And very quickly, this is just my observation, within a couple of days, Andre became the top student every single time in the class. And I didn't take any matter because it was just normal. Every time, it was just very strange. There's always Andre, like, just leave me alone. I'm just doing my thing. And then I never thought about it. But the reason I can tell you from experience is because of one single trait, Shraddha. That's it. Faith, total faith. Teacher, I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are, your personality. I just want to know the knowledge. Change my life, please. I'm open to you. Even when Vedanta came into my life, it was a 25-day course on the Bhagavad Gita. Same attitude. I sat down with all of this knowledge put aside, like you put your shoes away before entering a house. And I was like, yes, okay. Yeah, please, asking questions, curious, wanting to know. Yes, please. So curious. It's just total faith. There's no doubt. I don't care what you've done before, who you are, who you've learned from. This makes sense to me. I want to master it. Yes, please, more. And the Gita worked because of that for me like magic. Very quickly, the clarity came through because of Shraddha alone.
Can we say, Andre, that you also said that it made sense to you?
Yes, it made.
Can we say it's both?
Yeah.
Both faith and reason?
Yeah, okay. It definitely made sense. Otherwise, you would have not taken interest in the first place. However, I think what's louder than even that is, right, amongst your common sense of what makes sense or not, of course, there is that putting aside that person who wants to like interfere and be right and prove the other wrong and debate and all of this nonsense. It just drops away. It doesn't exist at all. Total instrument to be receiving what is being expounded. A clean, innocent, childlike instrument. I would say that is the number one quality that makes a brilliant student.
It's just interesting because in the education system as it is at the moment, the emphasis is totally on critical thinking. So it basically what you're saying should be dismissed and put aside.
Yeah.
That is the absolute focus of the education system in the West.
Right. Right. And we need to combine and we need to combine that. So critical thinking needs to be there, but with the critical thinker, I need to have my faith with me. Because otherwise I'll be now next one, good point. Next one's going to be anasuya, always using that critical thinking to find faults. Instead of using the critical thinking to understand what is being said, I use my very critical thinking to reveal flaws and show you how it doesn't work and how what I know is much better than what is being said.
That's why I sort of object to the phrase critical thinking, because students always take critical as meaning negative, adversarial, right? Critical as in you don't like it, you're going to try to dismantle it. Analytical thinking might be a better phrasing.
Okay, that's a good point. I'll take that on.
Just a word,
Sure. Yeah, it's amazing how even words themselves can stop us from even being receptive to a simple notion. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I'll take that on. Kerry?
I've been told by various teachers, well, that I should stick to one path and not get distracted by looking at other philosophies, whether it be something like Nietzsche or whether it be Buddhism or Judaism or whatever, but to just stick to Vedanta. Don't go buzzing around, looking here, looking there. And sometimes I find that difficult. I mean, I want to read something. I want to compare Vedanta to Buddhism or something like that. And but I try to think, well, maybe not. You'll get distracted. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you have to monitor yourself. You have to monitor yourself. Are you actually transforming? Is your life becoming better? Are you having tangible results, maybe? What do you want? You have to ask yourself. Like, am I getting a kick out of comparing, or am I actually, just be clear. Like, why am I pursuing different things? So it's really something that we have to figure out. What's that driving, compelling force that makes me want to look at 10 different things? And what am I really getting? If you're getting something good out of it, wonderful. And then you have to gauge what is it that you're getting out of it. So Now, when it comes to Vedanta, see, initially it's very hard because Vedanta is speaking of a cause that you cannot see. It's very easy to have faith towards things that you can see and observe, right? You know, I can show you that you can jump 2 meters. I can just show you other athletes who can do that. Like, cool, that's possible. But if I show you something that you cannot see or hear or experience, how are you going to have faith in that? See, it's even hard to have faith in systems that are perceptible or inferential, let alone like now, how are you going to have faith in like, I can't see the invisible cause. Where is it? So now, why then should you listen to Vedanta if you can't see it? Well, the person figures out that I have put my faith already in so many things, and nothing has quite made me satisfied. I'm still kind of looking for more things. I've definitely put my faith in this school and that school and that school. And I have, you know, engaged in debates and intellectual conversations and, you know, but that very person, despite them, proudly speaking of their school, whatever school it is, they're still dissatisfied. And so they say, well, something needs to change here. And they're not stupid. These are not dumb people. They're very intelligent people for the most part. In fact, everyone in the Upanishads, all of the students like Shaunaka from the Mundaka, he was a Mahashrama. Mahashrama means he's a great householder. A great householder is one who is relatively successful in life. They have good emotional intelligence. They have children. They have work. They're balanced. They do their prayers and puja and worship, and they've got teachers around them. They're a great householder. That's what Mahashrama means. A great, intelligent householder. Despite that, they all still came to a teacher dissatisfied. And they said, with all of this knowledge and intelligence and so on, I don't know what is that invisible thorn in me that doesn't just let me chill out in peace. That sublime certainty that it is all good. I don't have that. So the teacher then says, that is because you haven't still found what you're truly looking for. When you find the truth, that finally goes away, because the truth is that which is all the time here and now, and that very truth happens to be you. So what you're looking for is yourself, that fulfilled, full, complete self. Until you find that which is complete, you will feel the pangs of incompletion. That's how it manifests. And so the teacher says, you are already the whole. You're already whole and complete. And you just have to discover that for yourself. And like, how do I do that? Well, you have to see that what Vedanta is showing you is what is already something that is true now, but you're missing out because you're too busy putting your focus elsewhere. Your focus is on something that is attempting to help you, but it's not quite helping you. Because if you really were being helped, then you would be pacified in one school and you would have no problems with it. You would stay there and know that this is making sense and I'm going to listen and understand. Until you feel that total completion, fullness, then there will be some areas, somewhere, in some places where you feel incompleteness, non-fullness, and that's going to be a source of suffering and a source of continued seeking. And so Vedanta comes and shows you what is the cause of the world. What is the nature of this world? Let's start with the forms that you see all around us. What is it? What's the nature of them? What is the cause of you, the one who is inquiring? What is the cause? What is the nature of the cause of the universe? And what is your relationship to that cause of the universe? Let's talk about this. And then the student sits down and begins the inquiry. And they start to see very soon that what's being said through Vedanta, they cannot contradict. And of course, for that, you need a little bit of analytical thinking, as Mike said. You cannot contradict it, and it's simply pointing out what I missed out before. I'll give you an example of this. See, very often, before you come to Vedanta, you don't find very much value in the scriptures. The scriptures are like these things old, they're out of fashion, you know, scripture. It's like a word that is not, it's like a turn off, scriptures, right? Throw it away. It's this, there's a tendency to be turned off generally about that. Now look at this. As long as you're in that stage and you don't have the scriptures, then suppose you say, this is a real life argument I had with a someone who's not in the scriptures. They said, I'll simplify it. You know, you don't need to, know happiness. I don't need to know anything about happiness. Happiness is evident to me, because they were saying that you don't need the scriptures to know the self, right? Like the self is always evident to you, and that self is, you know, just happiness. And I said to them, that's completely true, right? We don't need anyone to tell us that I'm experiencing happiness. It becomes self-evident to all of us. When you're happy, you know you're happy. But look at this. Suppose you take that happiness as the final end of life. And you say, okay, so happiness is the final end of life. Great, I've got happiness, therefore I'm in touch with the nature, because the nature is happiness. Great. But you know what the scriptures say? They say, wait, there are degrees of happiness. There is sattvic happiness, pure happiness. When you see a sunset, it is not a kind of a what's in it for me happiness. It's just an innocent happiness. When you see a new baby born, that's a totally clean, pure version of happiness. Then you have a rajasic happiness. This is a kind of happiness when you win. Yes, I won. I scored the goal. I beat you at chess. I won. That's also happiness, but it's very kind of a little bit of more kind of dynamic, passionate, a little bit tainted by your own fancies. And then you have tamasic happiness. This kind of happiness is it's like kind of a sadistic happiness where you see someone suffer and I'm happy because they're suffering and I'm not, therefore I'm in a much better position. It makes me happy. All of them are happiness. If the person doesn't have a checklist, which you can only find in the scriptures, then whatever happiness you get, which is most likely not going to be sattvic, because most people don't start with the sattvic mindset, they're mostly in rajasic and tamasic, then they're going to take that as the final reality. And I use this example to show them why you need a checklist, why you need an authoritative book to verify that what you're experiencing is not tamasic or rajasic, but it is the highest form of happiness that you can enjoy. And they don't understand this. They still say, no, I don't need the scriptures. Happiness is, self-evident. Scriptures are old. You see? So no matter what you say to this mind, when it's covered by the clouds, even then you have to wait it out and wait for this person to finally have, how do they call it? Have some sense knocked into their heads and to just own up with faith and say, let me listen and let me listen to what the scriptures say. What is this final reality? Because until I get an authoritative checklist, no matter what I say, how would you ever know that is the final reality? Unless you have that authoritative checklist. That's why we need the scriptures. And so it's a constant argument between one side, you don't need the scriptures, and on the other side, you need the scriptures. But those who know the value of the scriptures, they have already gone through the stage of, I don't need the scriptures. But if you try to convince them that you need the scriptures, they're going to reply in the same way that you once upon a time replied when you didn't value the scriptures. So you just have to give it time. This is why Ishvara gives us lifetimes to figure our stuff out. And then Shraddha in the teacher. That was Shraddha in the teaching. Now, what about the teacher? Well, when it comes to the teacher, how do you know that the teacher is talking from actuality and not from memorized facts? Well, there's two primary conditions. The first is the teacher is a Shrotriya. This is the scriptural checklist. Shrotriya means that any topic that you are passionate about, you get it. You really understand it deeply to the core. You're able to put the dots together. You're able to, look at the details. How do they say? Cross the T's and dot the I's. All of those details are in your head. You just get the language. It's there, it's working. It's not a kind of a mystical thing. You get it. It's just clear. This applies to anyone, a science teacher, a physics teacher, a maths teacher, an English teacher. They just get their topic very well, and they're able to shuffle it around in any way whatsoever and accommodate any student whatsoever and answer questions from any angle easily. It's not an effort, it's just natural because they really have mastered the topic of the language and the logics of the scriptures. So that's Shrotria. They're well versed in the teachings. They're very familiar with it. And the second is Brahmanishta. Brahmanishta is not only are they able to understand this, but it has transformed their life. So they're living from the final outcome that book, the scriptures, is supposed to give you. And so they're established in that knowledge, living as that. And there is, as I said, there's sublime certainty of the reality. There's no doubts whatsoever. Things are normal. Things are, clear. It's just normal. Others can look at you as a normal person. They won't understand what you're talking about. They'll probably debate you. They will probably try to convince you that you're wrong. They're probably going to say and, kind of twist, Vedantic things into different language. They're probably going to prove you're wrong. You're totally unmoved by this because you understand that all that is here is one reality, the truth. The truth is always here and now. And there are little cups, walking around, and those cups are, have a certain thought. And what that thought is, that doesn't matter. What this thought is, it doesn't matter. What this thought is, it doesn't matter, because they're all just a bunch of thoughts walking around in this all-pervasive reality, which is awareness, and that awareness is the final truth. And so you understand that until the person is mature enough to sit down and listen, as my first teacher said to me, which I will never forget, I like his direct language, just shut up, keep your head down, and get on with the teaching. I was like, yes, sir, that's what I need to hear, military style. And I'm like, okay, so stop asking this and that, just do and get on with the program, and it's going to work for you. And I like that language, it's just, forget about this nonsense, just get on with the program. And so this faith comes out in two ways: through the teaching, faith in the teaching, faith in the teacher. Now, when it comes to teacher, what can happen is what's called a transference. And this can stop students from learning as good as they could. What transference is, there are two types. The first is positive transference. So the kind of relationship that you had with your father or mother, as they were an authority figure, that will most likely transfer onto the male or the female teacher. And that's the kind of relationship you will most likely have or see your teacher also. So when it comes to positive transference, what you say is, they are Bhagavan. Oh, they are the Lord embodiment. So only your teacher is the Lord embodiment. Everyone else is not. They are the greatest. They never make mistakes. They are so good in everything they do. But the problem with this is the moment that very teacher makes a mistake or shows some kind of a disappointing outcome, what happens to you and your thoughts? They all crumble. And now you start to inflict a different kind of transference, which is negative transference. Negative transference is opposite. You say, oh, they're not good. They made a mistake. I shouldn't feel like this in front of them. It is not working. And so you project so many ideas that you're not able to give yourself an easy time to learn. And what the teacher has to do is they have to negate both transferences. And how do they do that? Simple, by being human. By showing that the teacher is also just a human being. You know, if you want to call him or her Bhagavan, then I'm going to call you Bhagavan too, because Bhagavan is everything. So in other words, the teacher has to keep on reminding you they're just an ordinary, down-to-earth person who is going to die one day, just like you and I or anyone else, who is also gets hungry, who also, you know, sometimes has temperament issues, who also, you know, has these small likes and dislikes, you know, they all kind of creep in once in a while, who also has, you know, thoughts that are sometimes fuzzy. It's all normal. And so if the teacher kind of puts themselves as this big, ginormous person, then, you know, it's from a, I guess from a teacher standpoint, that would be really nice. But from your standpoint, it doesn't help you because you're not able to relate or connect to that person. So they always remain one step above you. But what a student really needs is just equals, like Arjun and Krishna. They're speaking head to head, level to level, eye to eye. Hey, man, I got you. You know, we're on this journey together. We both make mistakes. We both have a lot more to learn. Let's just pull through this thing called life to the best of our ability, and let's make it to the other side. How about that? And the student's like, oh, this is kind of cool. I can talk to someone that relates to me. And so we all together go on this journey, learning and correcting ourselves whenever we fall down, and we get up to the best of our abilities.
I think there is a bit of reverence though for the teacher, and I think that's where the Arjuna was struggling with Drona. Like, and he said it should be showering with arrows that are flowers. You know, he still struggled with the fact that Drona was opposing him. You know what I mean? With in the war, like. So I think that struggle, because he was his acharya, you know. So he had that struggle there, knowing that he was his teacher.
Yeah, it's nice.
So it's still, that reverence is still there.
Yeah.
To think you're opposing your teacher can be a challenge, I guess.
For sure.
In that regard, because that just came to mind now, just as one of his struggles.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be that respect for a teacher, no matter what. But at the same time, the teacher's job is to, you know, once in a while show their human side, and that's going to help the student, because the students will, you know, always put that kind of projection onto the teacher, and so we have to help each other to relate. I think what's more important than just knowledge transfer is also relationship. That's just common, down-to-earth relationship. In fact, I would say that with my teacher, Nima, the reason why this knowledge took hold so much is not just because of the knowledge transfer, but it's because personally, I have that yearning to just connect with the person, just be down to earth. Hey, you know, let's talk eye to eye. And that just allows you to trust them so much more, to take their knowledge more seriously. And it almost kind of allows you to you allow yourself to be more affected by what they say. So this can really help out.
Does a teacher always have to be enlightened themselves in order to teach these scriptures and this path?
Sure. So I don't think it's possible to teach this. I don't know how it is for others, but I don't think in this tradition of Advaita Vedanta, where it's a sacred parampara, for a teacher to be teaching unless they're a Brahmanishta. Maybe in other traditions, it may be the case, but in Advaita Vedanta, what I've seen, whoever teaches, they are coming from total clarity, as I said, sublime certainty of their nature and Ishvara and the whole vision of Vedanta. So, and that can be reassuring.
Thank you.
You know, sometimes I'm a little bit put off when I see various teachers, you know, they have a special hairstyle or they wear a crimson robe. You know, the various insignia of I'm different than you. And yet I realize it's just their way of, I don't know, separating themselves in a sense.
Well, actually, that's a good point, because that's going to follow up in the next verse, where Krishna is going to say, all beings follow their nature. So this is going to show us that irrespective of whether the person is quiet or verbal, or wears this clothes or is that clothes, or grihasta or sannyas, or lives alone or has a relationship, or is rich or is poor, it has no connection to whether they understand the truth or not. And we will speak more about this. And so Krishna wants to just point out that let people be their nature, because that is their nature. They want to leave, have those beads around their neck and so on. I like it, you may not like it. So this is what makes us a world of interest. If we were all the same, imagine this, every teacher is like exactly the same, monotone, everyone's just got normal hairstyle, right? Normal clothes. How would that be? Ironically, that would be worse, probably. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, give me some variety, please. So it's good that we have so much variety in this world. Yeah, and then it says also Shraddha, the second most important for a student is Anasuya, freedom from fault finding. This is the capacity, or should we say, there's a tendency to try to actively look for faults, to find some flaws in the person, and make some kind of a big deal out of it. So, they could make a mistake, or they're maybe getting patient with you, or they don't talk to you in a pleasant tone. And any small thing that happens is used as this kind of a proof. It's proof that they are not enlightened. They're not a good teacher. And so what happens is we dismiss them in one shot like that, whether it is your friend or your spouse or anything. We have to remember once in a while, there is not one living being who is without error. We have to acknowledge this right now. There is not one being you will ever meet in your life who is without error. Everyone is born with a certain punyam and papam, and this punyam and papam manifests as impressions, and these impressions percolate throughout your personality, and they will show or display a series of temperaments and moods and personality traits. And this is wonderful. Otherwise, we would all be like robots. Do you want to be like a robot? No, we don't want robots. So ironically, on one hand, errors, we kind of have this thing of, you made an error. But on the other hand, if you were just perfect, could you relate to that person who's just speaking so perfectly and smoothly, like a computer? You probably couldn't relate to them. In fact, now, with these AI voice models, they're trying to make it more realistic. There's one called Sesame. And the reason why Sesame, it's a most realistic AI voice model now. The reason why it's so relatable, I've tried it, I was like, I'm talking to a real life person, is because they intentionally added, you see, they added those things because that is how we talk in real life. And that ironically makes me really listen to this person, as opposed to Gemini or ChatGPT, was just perfect. Okay, cool. This is serious stuff here. So errors can also help you learn because you relate to them. Yes, Uma.
I had a question. Probably this is my own bit of a confusion because my mother tongue was Telugu, and some of it is very close to Sanskrit, and I understand some Sanskrit words because of my mother tongue. So I thought Asuya was jealousy. Anasuya means not to be envious.
Anasuya, see, there's always that indirect meaning,
Nuance.
that deeper meaning. So what I'm doing now is freedom from this kind of jealousy to find errors, like I don't like you being so good, or you know, you're too perfect, or therefore I'm going to bring you down so that I can feel good. So when we teach the scriptures, the teacher usually brings out the implied meaning, the deeper meaning behind the word, never the direct meaning. Otherwise, I can just say, go to the English dictionary and, you know,
Right. And I was trying to relate, right? Like I could tell that you were telling the subtle meaning of it, but I still wanted to ask anyway. Thank you.
So the answer is because it's a deeper implied meaning, and that's how I will teach. Yeah. And then he continues and he says, those who consistently follow my teaching with faith and the freedom to find faults eventually gain moksha. In other words, those who consistently engage in the lifestyle of karma yoga. And what is karma yoga? What is this vision? He says, eventually gain moksha. So the question is, what did it take for moksha to be gained? And according to the Gita, there are two principles. The first is karma yoga. So karma yoga is a way where you stop asking, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? How will I benefit? Into what is called for, what needs attention, what is the bigger picture here, what am I to do here? And karma yoga therefore involves two principles. The first is having a mind which is able to recognize that anything you give is going to the order. Anything you contribute is never going outside the order. It's only going back into the field. All of the money that you saved right now, suppose you don't have children, where's the money going to go that you're holding on to so tightly? Goes back to the government. The very government that I say, oh, our government is bad, to that one, the money goes back to. So everything that you do, that you say, that you contribute, ultimately, I remember it is all going back to the altar of the Lord, because everything is His. It is His design, His creation, His emotions, His thoughts. Everything is God's. None of it is ultimately mine. Now, when you remember this, then you have a little bit more composure, right? You're able to relax ultimately. It's not like, oh, my time, this is my time. Ultimately, even time itself is the Lord also. So how do you relate with the Lord? Time, 1 second, that is the Lord. So that's why we say, if you can't change someone, what do? You let time sort them out. Isn't that true? Time always sorts people out. And what is time? Ishvara. Let Ishvara sort them out. And they will come to see that the way they're thinking is not working, is not conducive to their well-being, and Ishvara will show you that through the course of time. So Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, having this, Buddhi, where it recognizes that it's all being given back to whence it came from. And the second is Ishvara Prasada Buddhi. Prasada Buddhi means whatever comes to me, whatever effort I put into the field, there will be some return on your investment. That is for sure. Now, that return on your investment, you don't know how it will turn out, really. It may not, or it may turn out as you wanted. But when it does, that is wonderful, because you can then ask, what now? Great, this has happened. What's next? Let me enjoy it while it's here, or let me sort it out. What now? So everything is an opportunity for your growth, to work things out and to look at where you went wrong. Could you have done better? And what will happen next time, right? So this is all part of your school here on earth. That is Ishvara Prasada Buddhi. Your living experience and everything that comes back to you is your school of life. And so life is no longer, oh, why did this happen to me? No, it happened to me. What's next? That's Prasada Buddhi. So that's Karma Yoga. That's the first section of the Gita. The second is Brahma Vidya. The question is now, what separates the Gita from traditional self-help books? Like, why don't we just go to, the bookstore or Kindle and learn all of these wonderful books on changing your life and having great emotional intelligence? So many great books out there. What separates the Gita from all of that?
They're not about the final reality.
The final reality. That is the glory of the Gita. And so the what these books will say, including science books and physics books and so on, what they will say is, who are you, right? So this is the first thing that the Gita answers, who are you? But they will also ask the same question, who are you? Now, what would they say? They will say, you are a small being and you have to do things to become bigger. This is their answer. What is the answer in Brahmavidya? You are already a big being. There is no need to work on becoming big. You just have to discover your limitless nature, and that is the work of Vedanta. And then they say, what is the nature of the universe? That's the second question. Who are you? First one. Second, what is the nature of this universe? Well, the universe is real. The world is real. The jivas are real. Time is real. It's all real. Isn't this true? This is common models of the world. Everything's real, and we're now studying what is real. And so we get so invested in what is real because it's real. It's worthy of looking into. It's worthy of studying. It's worthy of investigating. It's worthy of dying for because it's real. But what does Brahmavidya say? Well, it's not quite real, nor is it unreal. It's neither Sat nor Asat. It is dependently real. It is Mithya, and it has no difference. It has no reality apart from its cause. This is what the Brahmavidya says. And then the third question says, what is the nature of the cause of the universe? So who am I? What is the nature of the universe? And what's the nature of the cause of the universe? What do traditional books say? Or schools? The cause is?
Big Bang.
Yeah, Big Bang, right? The cause is away from us. The cause happened once upon a time. The cause is parked somewhere. The cause is over there bigger than this effect here. I'm sure there's a few more than that. The cause is emptiness. What does Brahmavidya say? The very cause of the universe is pervading everything right now. The cause never went. The cause is here as the air you breathe, as the words you listen to, as the life you experience. Everything is but the cause. And so it has a total paradigm shift on you, and you say, wow, this is, this is brand new for me. So I have to investigate into this. And when you do investigate into this and you gain moksha, what happens? He says, free from the hold of karma pala. In other words, one gains moksha. So what does this mean? Before the knowledge took place, where was your eye? It was in a limited body-mind instrument. You were as good as the doing, enjoying, suffering instrument. So you try to make your life genuinely to the best of your abilities. Understandable. When the knowledge came, there was a shift. And the shift was, I was never this doing, working out instrument. I was much bigger than it. And so all of the karma palas, the consequences that this instrument is to receive, at once they are disowned. In other words, this instrument had what's called sanchita karma, and sanchita karma is all of those karmas that are heading your way, Mr. or Mrs. Just wait, prepare yourself, brace yourself. They're coming. A whole series of pleasurable things and painful things. It's coming. You just wait for it. Now, where is it parked? Well, it's parked in a place that we just call sanchita karma. And so the sanchita karma was mine because it's always linked to the doer and the enjoyer who I thought I was. But when there's an identity shift, you recognize that that identity of who you are has no real connection to the sanchita karma, let alone to the individual. And so at once, you disown your entire account that was heading your way. Suppose, an example, I was listening on TV, there was a murder trial where a man was convicted of a murder. And he also thought somehow that, you know, he killed the person. I don't know what happened, but maybe he didn't. It doesn't matter. But he was on a death row. So imagine how painful it is to be years waiting to on a death row. So you got all this account on you, right? You're a prisoner. You're on a death row. So everything is consistent with what you thought you did. Now they discovered evidence that showed that he had no involvement in the murder. What happened? They told him that at once his account of everything that was about to happen was no longer his. And at once he was freed into the world. In other words, he was suffering, thinking, I did it. He was in pain, thinking, I did it. I need to forgive. God, please forgive me. Why did I do this? But none of that, throughout the years of suffering in prison, was he responsible for the murder. So like this, the individual finally, right, is disowned, and that means I have no connection to it. And whatever belongs to Andre doesn't belong to self. Whatever belongs to Eli doesn't belong to self. Whatever belongs to Bhuvana doesn't belong to self. And thus, what happens then is your prarabdha continues. Prarabdha is all of those things that are still coming, right? You cannot stop them. It's like firing an arrow, and you release the arrow. And the arrow is heading towards a person, okay? So it's about to kill someone. And then you walk away and you get enlightened, okay? And what happens now? The arrow is going to change course. Is the arrow now going to change course and like go around that person? Go, oh, sorry, so now that he's enlightened, I'm not going to kill you. No, the arrow is going to go straight towards that same person, and they're still going to be hurt. And then the police, what are they going to say? Oh, look, mister, we know it's your arrow, but now that you're enlightened, we're not going to arrest you. No, they're going to arrest your body, mind, whether you like it or not, because the body, mind was the doer of shooting that arrow, and the consequences always go back to the original doer. So your prarabdha karma doesn't stop until last breath. The body, mind of a wise person still goes through the pains and pleasures that are yet to be experienced. And when that is over, we call that physical death. Now, one little thing to understand is, you see, moksha is not freedom from karma palas. Moksha is not freedom from consequences. It is freedom from the notion, thinking that the consequences belong to me. You see the distinction? The wise person's body mind still has karma pala. He cannot erase that. They're still going to enjoy and suffer and so on. But were those karma palas yours to begin with? They were never yours. But like that murderer, that apparent murderer in jail, he thought it was mine. So he suffered consistent with what he thought. When it was clear, when that knowledge took place, it was not me. At once, he was relinquished for that, you know, in his lifetime. You know, Dayananda has this nice example. He says, imagine there's a husband, and he's got 3 wives, and they have different names. One of them is called Sanchita wife, one of them is called Prarabdha wife, and the other one's called Agami wife, okay? And they're all kind of like pestering him, you know, like the Sanchita wife, she's been with him the longest, right? So him and Sanchita wife, they got like the big history of stuff to work out. Now, the little bit of a newer wife is the Prarabdha wife. You know, she's kind of growing on him. She's like the most active in his life. And he's, you know, whenever he comes home, she's there. She's always following him wherever he goes. So she's just giving him a hard time and an easy time. He can't get rid of her no matter what. And then the Agami wife, well, she's a kind of like in the background. She always comes later, you know, when he's like free and there's no one around him, she always comes to him then. She's like this future wife, you know. But now he dies. What happens to all 3 wives? They become widows. They are all disowned at once. Now, the next verse, he continues and says, without shraddha and being devoid of discrimination, what happens? We dismiss the teachings and we dismiss Advaita. We dismiss it all. Ye tve tad abhyasu yantaha nanutishtanti me matam sarva jnana vimudham stan vidhi nashtan achetasaha.
Whereas those who, being critical of this teaching without reason, do not follow my vision, who are deluded in all realms of knowledge and devoid of discrimination, know them as lost.
Okay, so those without, he says, those critical of this teaching due to lack of discrimination, do not follow my vision. Do not listen to what Vedanta has to say. Dismiss Vedanta. In other words, without their trust in the teaching, they're dismissive because their vision is better. It makes more sense. And while they say that, all throughout there's a lingering sense of I am not fulfilled, which is really funny. So the Gita, my vision is better than the teaching of the Vedanta, but all throughout that, the person's having this unrest, right? Until they discover or find out that this unrest doesn't leave them. And so through non-leaving, they discover, wait, then something's missing, because if my system was really working, it would have been, you know, I would have been okay. I would just stop searching. So thus they continued to be bothered. And this bothering gets expressed in two ways in the individual's life. In other words, when they dismiss the teaching and they say, my vision is better, how do you show that their teaching is still not complete? Because number one, it comes out as anger. Anger can be, usually it's connected to your sense of being treated unfairly, but it's also a deeper stirring of something that's unresolved underneath. Now, anger can come out in two ways. The first is active anger. Active anger is where some small conflict happens and the person explodes. In other words, they just unleash upon you. And you say, this is kind of premature, you know, you're just too sensitive to the situation. The second is what's called passive anger. Passive anger is quiet. It is withheld, and it doesn't come out verbally, but rather it comes out through different means, such as sadness, negativity, cynicism, and even sometimes, you know, trying to cope with that by putting up like a happy face. Did you ever see those happy faces, you know, in the spiritual world, like, you know, sly smile to kind of, you know, self-deceive myself that everything's okay. But it's just a cover up from anger, carrying this happy face all the time.
Can it also come out as passive-aggressive behavior?
Passive-aggressive. So this is the second. So active and passive-aggressive. And so this passive-aggressive, as I said, can percolate as negativity or just kind of a little bit of aggressive language or condescending language with an opposing debate. So it finds a way to release itself. And this affects your emotional landscape. And that emotional landscape determines what kind of decisions you make and what is the quality of your engagement with a person. And the second is, what can happen is fear. Now, sometimes even an angry person, that is actually fear being disguised. So it's much easier to show anger than to show fear. But fear can also come out as three ways. The first one is paranoia. So look at this. On one hand, my teaching works, but on the other hand, I have fear and I'm showing paranoia. So I'm imagining bad things happening. I'm imagining or catastrophizing worst case scenario. That's the first one. It's a mark that something is unresolved in the mind. The second is overconfidence. So when a person has this fear of being revealed or being seen or being exposed, what they often do is they show a form of compensation. And so they say, you know, I am not fearful. I am strong. I can, you know, do my own thing. But underneath, it is really just not wanting to admit that there is a deeper fear from not being settled in oneself, from distrusting life and distrusting the general order. And the third one is sometimes it can lead to lack of trust. So they say, well, I don't trust you, you're going to deceive me, you're going to cut corners, you're going to hurt me. Now, can you truly have an easygoing relationship if there's a sort of a distrust in the person? Any moment they can leave me, any moment they can hurt me. Is that possible? It's not possible. That means even a teacher is just there to ultimately hurt me. So all of these things, as long as they're lurking underneath, it becomes very hard to ascertain Krishna's vision, because the person's not able to enjoy the simple things. So they need constant highs, bigger and better things to stimulate them, because this anger and fear keeps on lurking as the background behind their thoughts and their general behavior. So they want these big things in life, just you need to stimulate me through these big experiences. Why? Because the mind is so kind of disturbed, but on the surface, it's all just not nice, intellectual. Let's have a debate. Let me tell you about this and that. But underneath, I tell you, when you get back to the bottom issue, there is stuff that's lurking within that needs to be sorted out first. And so what we have to do is use situations in life as our friends and use them to see where your shortcomings are. How are your responses? Are they patient? Are they understanding? If someone challenges you, what are you experiencing in that moment? Is it fear? Is it anger? Do you want to attack them? Is it passive aggressive? Like, I'll keep quiet, but I'm going to do something later on. What's going on in that moment in you? That is your perfect chance to sort these very things that are keeping one from constantly just pulling one down into these darker areas and judgmental and comparison and not able to recognize the self in all beings, which is the greatest thing. If you just relax and you go, this opponent is pervaded by the same self that I am. That is the greatest joy, to be able just to relax in that understanding. But until the mind settles, it's not going to have that opportunity. Yeah, because it's too kind of cloudy and, dusty. So you have to just wipe that dust away, thought by thought, response by response.
It happened with me only last week. I was talking to a friend, and I just told him in the evening around 7 that I might have a tea now. And then he told me, "Oh, but you are spiritual. Why are you having tea in the evening? You should control your mind." And I'm like, what is your issue with that? And he was like, "Oh, spiritual people need to control their mind, and that is the first step towards spirituality." And it irritated me a bit, and I did tell him, like, it's nothing to do with the food and the diet. It is, but I'm not following that path right now. I'm just learning about it, and I wanted to understand, the deeper meaning in life. That's spirituality for me. And then I explained him this much, and then I told him to just change the topic, because I thought that he's not ready to have this conversation. But he was like, and I also told him, like, your fundamentals are different and not clear yet, so maybe let's change the topic. And then I segued into other topic, though he disconnected the conversation after that immediately within like 2-3 minutes. But then it was irritating to then me realizing, like, okay, it's his just opinion, and I need not prove it to anyone what I do, what I need to do, and why I'm doing any classes or any meditation. But then what you are saying right now, it's like weird. And I'm in my early 30s, so it's very hard for me to even connect with people like that. But yeah, I mean, it's annoying, and yeah, but I managed my emotions through that. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about these specific topic up to like many people, but these people are very curious about, oh, this lady is not doing this, not doing that. Why are you sleeping early? Why are you getting up early? Like these people are really annoyed sometimes by your way of doing things.
Yeah.
So they're curious and they try to take you in the confidence and want to know more about you and then attack you. This is what I have faced
Yeah.
in some times, and I'm like, okay, now I understand it, and that is how I'm going to handle it very calmly, and I'm still going to have my tea. Yeah.
Yeah, after all of that, still have your tea at the end, and just
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd that you do something, so that's why you can't have tea or you can't have anything you like or you want to eat. I mean, I'm not saying that go and have an alcohol, which you might do it, but I'm not somebody who relates it to spirituality or a way of being.
yeah,
And I've heard like in some forms of uh, prayers or like some deities, they even have like alcohol and meat. So I'm not concerned about that. I don't know much to comment about it.
right, right.
So, but I still just wanted a plain innocent tea, and I had this conversation with that person, and yeah, it still bothers me, but not that much. When I was in my late 20s, because it was so hard for me to connect with people around me.
Mm.
So yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you're acknowledging it first for yourself, and then besides that, you still did what you want, and it was also a chance for you to see where you're coming from, and next time be a little bit stronger in your responses. So this is what we say is,
Yeah, I hardly make friends, Andre. And if I do this, then probably I'll die alone.
yeah,
So I politely try to have that conversation, but then I'm not very aggressive, or like I've not fully defined my boundaries yet around it. But then I try to politely change the topic. And sometimes I know some people will be like, oh, see, she seems peaceful. Let's irritate her. Let's talk about something which might annoy her. And I get that now. I'm
yeah,
like, these people are unhappy. They don't know what they're doing, but I'm not getting into the drama.
yeah,
It
yeah,
happens to me often.
yeah, life sometimes throws at us on and on situations that we need to, until we become at peace with them, life just says, okay, enough. She's had enough of these people. Now let's send her a different kind of people. So sometimes you just have to go through these people, right? Build your core values, your boundaries, and then suddenly life says, okay, she learned. Now next train comes.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I'm
relate to
still
this. I relate to this.
still working on those. Still working on those, but in my late 20s, I was terrible. I think in my early 20s also, I was so confused. I like what you were saying, that people will try to tell you different things, be cynical. And it happened to me. And I think I was depressed straight away for many years because I just didn't understand. I'm like, I want to do this, but why everybody around me is just like so doubtful about the topics which I want to learn. And I mean, it was so depressing for me to even come to the reality in like my early 30s. Now I'm saying I was so underconfident while dealing with so many people, like 90%, 99% of the people I met.
Yeah. We can relate to this, can't we? All of us. We have these figures. They keep on showing, oh my God, when are they gonna go? And then patience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you join these classes and then you find your group.
Yeah. It holds us. The classes hold us every month, every week.
Yeah.
All right. So next week, thank you for sharing, Ben. Thank you. So next week we will continue verse 32, and this whole about why people are the way they are. This will be verse 33. All beings follow their nature. So this will become a little bit reassuring. Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.